Hello, hello. I am Coach Jay, and it's a great day. I always like to start my classes with a corny dad joke, and today's is this. I used to play piano by ear, but now I use my hands. Ba-dum-bum. If you can close your eyes, if you feel safe, and take two deep healing breaths with me, in through the nose, out through the mouth, nice and slow. One of the quickest ways to regulate your nervous system. One more time. All right. I'm going to give you a few common sense lessons, but they're important about surviving infidelity. So, number one, anyone can become a betrayed spouse. No one has immunity. This is the ugly reality. It doesn't matter how old you are. There are people in their early 20s, there's people well into retirement years. It really doesn't matter how long you've been together. Um, there's people together that have been married, unmarried. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have kids, no kids, six kids, newborns, grown kids. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant. It doesn't matter if your mother's on her deathbed sick. Doesn't matter if you're high school sweethearts. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how little bit money you have. It doesn't matter if you 32 double D, whatever the perfect size is for women. And it doesn't matter, men, if you have the best pecs and the best job. Um, it doesn't matter. Infidelity does not discriminate. And so because of that, it tells you that it wasn't your fault. There, as a matter of fact, statistics show that it's usually the healthiest relationships where there's an affair. And so that should tell you that it has really nothing to do with the marriage or nothing to do with the person. Don't get me wrong, there's some components there, we need to look into, but this individually has to go uh, to the person who made that decision, period. So, like I said, because of knowing this, you have to understand it's not your fault. Since anyone can become a betrayed spouse, the affair clearly is not because something that the betrayed spouse is or isn't or did or didn't do. It wasn't because you're not young enough or attractive enough or um, rich enough or sexual enough or fun enough, etc. Countless people with these qualities in abundance, including you, still get cheated on. If you're watching this and betrayal is a part of your life journey. Sadly, many, if not most, betrayed spouses blame themselves for their spouse's affair and infidelity. Now, sure, there may be mistakes, like I said, that you made throughout your marriage that you both need to be aware of and accept and work on, but that's only responsibility you have. That's it. That's the responsibility you have. You are responsible for you and your decisions and how you show up in the marriage and the relationship. Anything that happens outside the relationship is not on you. But getting past the affair, that it was your fault, is a hard thing for a betrayed spouse. It takes understanding of why the affair happened. It takes knowledge of the dynamics of the affair and the ability to shift your thinking um, from where you truly believe that you are perfectly fine the way you are, not to blame, um, not to take responsibility for your spouse's or significant other or partner's decisions. Take responsibility for how you showed up in the relationship. But like I said, anything outside of the relationship is not your responsibility. So therefore, having said that, the next one is there isn't anything you could have done. Many of you will go into problem solving mode. One question many people torture themselves is, what could I have done to prevent this? And I'm going to be honest with you. The short answer is, unless you're a psychic, nothing. Um, did your spouse come to you before the affair and say, I need to tell you that I've been deeply unhappy with myself in our relationship, that I feel tempted to have an inappropriate relationship with someone? Um, did they say, if you don't change this, I'm going to do that? Did they come to you in any way, shape, or form and say, unless we get professional help, I'm leaving you, or I'm going? Um, did your spouse ever give you the opportunity to be very frank and say, if you do not do A, I'm going to do B, and A is have an affair? Because if they didn't, then there's really nothing you could have done to change that. Um, uh, we have to work on communication, we have to work on honesty, we have to work on all these things, but those are things that happen, after a D-Day. All right. One of the things I want to say is you're never going to truly understand uh, I'm gonna just say WS for wayward spouse, if you can keep that acronym. So WS is wayward spouse. So it's the spouse that was active outside the relationship with secrets or physical activity or whatever. You're never truly going to understand the WS choices, the wayward spouse's choices. Now, you could get all the information that and collect and ask questions and all this other stuff, but I say to people all the time, do you truly completely get how and why Jeffrey Dahmer was able to do everything he did? Well, no. Well, that's because you're not Jeffrey Dahmer. So no matter how much information you get from your spouse, your partner, your significant other, you're never, unless you have that person's brain and their life and their experiences and everything else, you're still not going to get the whole extent of it. Sure, okay, they might have had some childhood trauma. Sure, they didn't have tools. Sure, they were immature. Sure, they felt neglected. What great, fine, and dandy. A lot of people feel all those things and don't have affairs. So like I said, you're really truly never going to understand the choices. But we still ask why, and we keep asking ourselves this. One thing that we can come up with 100 excuses for the infidelity, in the affair. But like I said, well, I shouldn't say excuses, components that contribute to the reason for the affair. But even though without peace, without all the pieces, you can't have peace, you're never going to get to a point where you get out of bed and say, you know what you just made sense. And I understand why you were in that 6 year affair. Okay, all is good. Let's go have a cup of coffee together. Like, that's not going to happen, you know? You can buy countless books. You may diagnose your wayward spouse, as narcissistic personality disorder, bipolar disorder. You could say it's addiction. It's a family of origin issue. He's got the knight in shining armor syndrome. It's postpartum depression. This need to get answers and make sense is understandable, like I just said, but you'll eventually realize that you will never be able to fully and completely understand the decisions your partner made. It won't make sense to you. uh, I don't necessarily think it'll hurt less either. It'll give you some understanding so healing's possible, but that confusion and that healing, it's here for the duration. Um, so it's possible that your wayward spouse could be dealing with, serious disorders or issues and needs help. This still doesn't justify their choices or behavior because, like I said, a lot of people have disorders and weaknesses, but those are two separate things. Making a decision to have an affair, is different from a disorder. I never heard of a disorder of cheating. Ironically, there are some studies that recently came out on biological links that people in affairs have similar, but I'm not going to get on that in this one right here. Bottom line, we all know the difference between right and wrong. All right. Um, the other frustrating aspect about this, which is the next thing I want to say, is you cannot fix your wayward spouse. The reality is, um, this may drive you crazy, but you cannot fix your wayward spouse. You marriage counseling can't fix it. Books won't fix it. Sometimes praying to God won't fix it. And that's not to say God can't do it. It's that your spouse has to do the work. He or she has to understand why they did what they did, the components of the damage they did, get to the bottom of it, and start dealing with this at the root of the problem. When we do something wrong, like having an affair or we argue, we usually don't think of we don't think to ourselves about our part of what it was. We typically don't ask ourselves, what did I do to cause this problem? We don't, because it's so much easier to look out rather than look within. Part of looking within and taking responsibility for ourselves is having the willingness and honesty enough to question ourselves about what really drives us. Which is why I always say, we argue about topics when really it's about issues. So we can argue about why didn't you put your dish in the sink? But really the issue is, I don't feel you respect me. And I've asked you to put your dish in the sink. And when you don't, I feel disrespected. But instead of talking about how you feel disrespected, you're going to argue about the dishes being dirty. To go a step further, this introspection means a willingness to change what we see in order to make changes. So the question might be asked, how can I get my spouse to look inward and to become more introspective after an affair, after broken trust? After all, chances are that if they were to be introspective to begin with, they probably wouldn't have wound up in an affair or whatever they're doing. So the answer is, quite frankly, there is no sure way to get this person to be introspective. You can't make anyone do anything about their inner self unless they see the benefits for themselves. If your wayward spouse doesn't want to change, there's not a thing you can do about it to make him or her change. And what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to be left with, okay, is this a negotiable or a non-negotiable? Um, Kind of similar, but I'll go into the next thing, is you really don't have a lot of control over the relationship. Again, you have control in how you present yourself. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm on a call and somebody will say, I was so sideswiped, Mr. J. I was married for 25, 30, 35 years, and out of nowhere, my spouse got up and left. You can't control your relationship. You can't control the other person. I know it sounds discouraging, but the hard truth is you have to accept that since you can't change, fix, or control your spouse, um, uh, you can't control your relationship and you can't control the outcome of it. Anytime there's two people of free will, hurt's going to happen. Decisions are going to be made where somebody has profound heartache and headache. Can't control it. You can only control how you deal with that headache and heartache. You couldn't stop your wayward spouse from cheating. You can't stop it from happening again. That's the scary truth that you have to accept, and you have to make your wayward spouse want to stay in the marriage or want to work on the marriage. I'm sorry, you can't make them stay in. You can decide if you want to reconcile, decide if you want to forgive them, decide if you want to rebuild, but they have to have a willingness, not only a willingness, a determination, a motivation, and a stick to itiveness. If you ever thought that you had any control over your spouse or any relation, give up that illusions now. You will waste a lot of time and energy otherwise. You'll waste emotional resources begging your wayward spouse. You'll try to cling to the wayward spouse. You'll think that if I can just become a better spouse, whatever that means, um, you might get some breast augmentation and you might go work out and you might, get a second job to make money and stuff. Um, it's not about all that. Those could be some contributing factors that lead to marital issues, but when it comes to the infidelity, it's listen, infidelity is a whole nother garden that has to be watered, and a relationship is a whole nother garden that has to be watered. Yes, there's relationship and you got to water that, but infidelity is a whole separate account. It's like, you have a checking account and a savings account. Both of them are very important for different reasons. You have to heal your marriage. You also have to heal your checking account. Your savings account, you have responsibility in. You have no responsibility in the checking account, if you can get that analogy. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is eventually you're going to have to make a choice. The choice is simple to stay or leave. Even if your wayward spouse is leaving or left you, you still have the choice to, you still have choices to make. The choice might be simple, but it isn't easy. No choice is easy. Choices are simple. Choices are very simple. Thinking about buying a lottery ticket is simple. Winning the lottery is not that easy. I know it's not the same, but you may not know what to do or what you want for a while, and that's fine. You sit on this. You can leave today. You can leave a month from now. You can leave 6 months from now. You can leave 2 years from now. But don't make any drastic decisions immediately. Make decisions of what you're going to do in the meantime to self care, for surviving, for healing. But you don't need to make any life changing decisions anytime soon. Do what you have to do to figure things out. Realize that you're likely to change your mind many times. I mean, one day you're gonna be like, "This is bull crap, out of here," and the next day you're gonna be like, "Well, maybe I do see some hope." Talk to people you trust. Pray, meditate. Talk to an attorney just to know what your options and rights are. Absolutely, because I always think choices are important, even if this idea scares you. Information is power. Ultimately, you have to make your own decisions. Your therapist, your pastor, your parent, me, anybody else you talk to, they're not the ones that are going to live with the benefits or the consequences. You're the one that has to live with your choices. Even though you have two choices, there's several possible outcomes to those choices. So you can either stay and it turns out good. You can stay and it turns out bad. You can leave and it turns out good. You can leave and it turns out bad. No matter what decision you make, there's going to be pros and cons and there's going to be risks. And that's what's scary. I get it. A lot of the times, what's scary is not change, it's transition to change. That transitional period can be very scary. Realize there's risk with staying, and realize there's a ton of work that's going to have to do if you're going to stay. There's tremendous and profound benefits to staying, but it's going to take many, many years of lots of hard work. You got to be willing. Both parties have to be willing to do this. That's not to say that staying is a doomed proposition. You know, you'll see many people that have stayed and say this relationship is 10 times better than it's ever was, or this is the marriage I've always dreamed of. Um, but you're not going to get there overnight. So, um, do whatever you need to do to rebuild trust. Make sure that your partner is honest and transparent and they're being accountable and you have access to their social media, their phones, P.O. boxes if they have any. Um, Not necessarily work accounts because, things can be private, but but if if there's not a major issue with you having a work account, you should have work passwords and stuff. Um, Prayerfully, you're not going to do anything to jeopardize their job because that would not be cool. Um, do you need, a disclosure letter? Do you need a no contact letter for the affair partner? Do you need, to renew promises in the marriage? Whatever you need. Um, do you need to change jobs? Do you need to sell houses? Do you need to change cars? Do you need to, I mean, whatever is needed, you know? Do you need to hang around different people? Do you need to change the landscape of many aspects of your life? There has to be a willing, a motivation, a dedication, and a stick to itiveness. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is if you choose to leave, which is within your right, and like I said, you can do that in a day, do that today, you can do that 5 years from now. You could say, you know what, I'm going to give my spouse a couple of years. And if your partner, your spouse, your significant other is not stepping up to the plate, you leave in 3 years, 5 years. There's no, your life is your life. You write the chapters of your life book. Don't give anybody else the pen. Okay. You will read posts and threads of other betrayed spouses who separate and divorce and learn some pretty difficult lessons. The most important seems to be that you must plan your moves in advance. Again, this is if you want to leave. Many betrayed spouses thought their wayward spouse would play fair, think of the children, do what's right, only to be blindsided by their wayward spouse's ruthlessness in the divorce process. And I always say, you marry one person, but you divorce another. Protect yourself, and if you have any children, make sure you protect your children. Consult an attorney if you haven't already. Arm yourself with information. Know your financial situation inside and out, including any secret accounts that you may have suspicions about. Gather documents. Start your own accounts and begin separating you and your partner's finances. Plan ahead. Your quality of life and possibly your children's quality of life depends on you having a very careful exit strategy. Um, Arm yourself with support systems as you go along. People that you need, places that you can go, uh, facilities, organizations you can tap into. If you need to disengage with your soon-to-be ex, start that process. The good news is that there's a pathway, and there is an end. Divorce will eventually be finalized. You will move on. Your hurt will become less. Now, that's not to say that your paths won't cross with your partner again, your future ex partner, because if you have kids or grandkids or a business together, or if you live in a small town, you may cross paths, but you can get rid of some of the roots that connect you together. Keep in mind, I just want to tell you, not making a choice is still a choice. No one can judge you for the choices you make. You have to do what you can and you have to live with your decisions. You are a person of worth. Your life is precious. If you can live this life in a way that's peaceful, then you have to do what you must. I don't care what your mother, your brother, your fiance, whatever, whoever says. Your life is just between you and your creator, simply put. And the last thing I just want to tell you is that no matter what you decide, as long as peace is on the table, peace has to be on the table. You will survive this. You will survive this. You will. There's great news, which is what I wanted to tell you that surviving this experience is absolutely possible. Whether you stay married, you stay in the relationship, you choose to divorce, you will survive this. And if you put in the work, you can also thrive. But you need to ask yourself if I would be satisfied staying, what would my life look like in in 10 weeks? What would it look like in 10 months? What would it look like in 10 years? If I leave, what would my life look like in 10 weeks, 10 months, 10 years? What are the non-negotiables if I stay? What are the new rules if I stay? What is the new normal if I were to stay? And if these aren't respected, then I need to respect myself enough to leave the situation. Affairs don't have to be a deal breaker, guys. They don't have to be a deal breaker, especially because upwards of 60% or more of all couples encounter infidelity in some way, shape, or form. It's just that 99% of the time somebody experiences infidelity and leaves, we hear about it. 99% of the time somebody experiences infidelity and stays, we don't. So you have to have it in your power to make your marriage or your separation, in general, your life, thrive. And that comes down to your decisions, your healing, your new you.